glowed like a fallen star that night. Lanterns hung from every golden pillar, casting warm light across marble floors. Laughter echoed through halls filled with the richest people in the kingdom. They had come to celebrate the billionaire's greatest triumph, a new fortune that made him untouchable. But wealth cannot silence the past. As the music swelled, the grand doors creaked open. An old woman entered, her cloak dusty from long travel. The crowd parted, whispers spreading like wildfire. She walked straight toward the billionaire, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "You made a promise," she said, her voice cutting through the celebration. "A sacred vow, sealed with your own words, yet you buried it like a shameful secret." The billionaire's face went pale. His hands trembled against his golden cup. The old woman turned and pointed toward the palace gates. There, barely visible in shadow, stood a young man in worn clothes. His face was weathered by hard work, his eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "That youth," she declared, "carries the proof of your broken oath." The room fell silent. Fear gripped the billionaire's heart, and somewhere in the darkness, jealous eyes watched, plotting to destroy the truth before it could rise. The young man's name was Cale. He lived in a small cottage at the edge of the village, where morning mist clung to the ground like forgotten dreams. Each day he rose before dawn to work the fields, his hands rough and scarred from endless labor. People rarely noticed him. He moved through life like a shadow, always present, never seen. But behind his quiet manner lived a deep, unexplained sadness. Sometimes, late at night, fragments of memories would surface. A woman's gentle voice, warm arms holding him. Then, nothing, just emptiness. Cale wore a strange pendant around his neck, a carved wooden symbol he'd had since childhood. He didn't know where it came from. The old woman who raised him had given it to him before she died, whispering only, "Keep this safe, your truth lives within it." Tonight, something had pulled him to the palace gates, a feeling he couldn't name, urgent and frightening. He stood in shadow, watching the celebration through iron bars. Then the mysterious old woman appeared and pointed directly at him. His heart hammered. The pendant at his throat suddenly felt warm, and the old woman's voice reached him across the distance. "Your fate is tied to his. The time has come." Please kindly subscribe, like for more videos. Inside the palace, the billionaire's mind raced backward through time. The accusation had struck him like lightning, illuminating shadows he'd spent years keeping dark. His hands clenched the armrests of his golden throne. He remembered. God help him, he remembered. Years ago, before wealth transformed him into this distant, powerful man, he had made a vow, a desperate promise spoken in a moment of guilt and fear. He had sworn on everything sacred to protect someone, to right a terrible wrong. But power changes people, success builds walls, and the billionaire had convinced himself that forgetting was safer than remembering. Now the past stood at his gates, wearing the face of a struggling youth. "Leave us," he commanded his guests, his voice barely steady. The crowd hesitated, then slowly dispersed, their whispers trailing like poison. But one man remained in the shadows. The billionaire's closest advisor, Lord Varon, watched with calculating eyes. His jaw tightened as he observed the old woman, the youth, and his master's obvious fear. Varon had climbed to power by keeping the billionaire's secrets buried. If truth emerged now, his own position would crumble. He smiled coldly and slipped away through a side passage. The youth would not survive long enough to speak his truth. The old woman found Cale still standing at the gates, confusion written across his face. She approached slowly, her weathered hands gentle as she touched his shoulder. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked softly. "The pull towards something you cannot name. The emptiness where memory should live." Cale nodded, unable to speak. "Long ago," she continued, "a promise was made. Not written in any book, but sealed with sacred words that the universe itself witnessed. Such promises cannot be broken without consequence. They echo through time, waiting for justice." She reached into her cloak and pulled out an ancient scroll, its edges burned and fragile. "This promise binds two lives together, the billionaire's and yours. He swore to protect you, to give you what was rightfully yours, but fear made him hide you away instead." "Why me?" Cale whispered. "Because you are the key to everything he built and everything he fears losing." Her eyes darkened with warning. "But child, you must understand, danger walks behind you now. There are those who will kill to keep the past buried. Men are coming for you, even as we speak." The old woman pressed something into his palm, a small carved token. "Keep this with your pendant. Together, they hold the truth." Cale barely made it 3 steps from the palace gates before Lord Varen appeared, blocking his path. 6 armed men emerged from shadows behind the advisor, their faces hard and merciless. "You," Varen said coldly, stepping forward. "What did that witch tell you? What lies has she filled your head with?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Cale stammered, backing away. His heart pounded against his ribs. "Don't play innocent with me, boy. You come here with your convenient pendant and your sad story, thinking you can manipulate a powerful man. Tell me what you want, and perhaps I'll let you leave with your life." Cale's hand instinctively went to his chest, covering the pendant beneath his worn shirt. The movement didn't escape Varen's notice. In one swift motion, Varen lunged forward and ripped the pendant from Cale's neck. The leather cord snapped. Varen held it up to the torchlight, and his face went white as death. The symbol carved into the wood was unmistakable, the Billionaire's family crest. The one that had been lost 20 years ago, the one Varen had helped hide along with so many other secrets. "Impossible," Varen breathed, his hands beginning to shake. This changed everything. The boy wasn't just some peasant making false claims. He carried proof. News of the pendant reached the billionaire within the hour. A servant whispered the discovery into his ear during a restless, sleepless night. The words struck him like a physical blow. He stumbled to his private chamber and unlocked an ancient chest hidden beneath floorboards. Inside lay treasures from his past, letters, photographs, and wrapped in silk, an identical wooden pendant. His hands trembled as he held it up to candlelight. The carving matched perfectly, 2 halves of one whole, just as the old woman had promised all those years ago. The memory crashed over him like a wave. He saw himself, 20 years younger, standing in a humble cottage. A dying woman pressed a baby into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "This is your son," she had whispered. "Born of your mistake, but innocent of your sin. Promise me you'll protect him. Promise me you'll give him the life you stole from his mother." He had promised, before witnesses, before heaven itself. He had even commissioned 2 pendants, one for the child, one for himself as proof of his vow. But when wealth came, shame followed. He had hidden the child away, convinced himself it was protection when really it was cowardice. "Bring him to me," the billionaire commanded his most trusted guard. "Tonight, in secret, before Varen can poison this any further." The secret meeting happened in a forgotten tower room, far from listening ears. Guards escorted Cale through hidden passages, their faces unreadable. Fear hammered in his chest. Was this a trap? Would he leave this place alive? The billionaire stood by a window, his back to the door. When he turned, Cale saw something unexpected in those powerful eyes, fear mixed with desperate hope. "Come closer," the billionaire said softly. "Let me see your face in the light." Cale stepped forward, confusion and anger warring inside him. "Who am I to you? Why does everyone suddenly care about a nobody?" The billionaire's breath caught as moonlight illuminated Cale's features. He saw echoes of a woman he'd once loved and betrayed, saw his own jawline, his own stubborn mouth, his own eyes staring back at him. "You're not nobody," he whispered, reaching toward Cale's face. "You're—" The door burst open. Lord Varen strode in, accompanied by armed guards, his face a mask of concern that barely hid the fury beneath. "My lord," Varen interrupted smoothly, "I must speak with you immediately. This boy is dangerous. He's come to blackmail you with forged trinkets and lies. I have evidence." The moment shattered like glass. Varen moved between them like a serpent, his voice poisonous honey. "My lord, consider carefully. This boy appears from nowhere, wearing a convenient pendant, claiming connection to your past. Don't you see? It's an obvious scheme." The billionaire wavered. Years of trusting Varen's counsel made him hesitate. "Think of your reputation," Varen continued, leaning close. "If word spreads that you acknowledged some random peasant as connected to you, every fortune seeker in the kingdom will invent similar stories. Your empire will crumble under false claims and scandal. Everything you've built, everything we've built together, will be destroyed." Each word worked like a blade, cutting away the billionaire's fragile courage. Fear whispered louder than truth. "He could ruin you?" Varen pressed. "Is one moment of sentiment worth losing it all?" The billionaire looked at Cale, then away. Shame burned in his chest, but fear burned hotter. "Remove him from the palace," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Give him money for his trouble, but he is not to return. Ever." Kale found the old woman waiting near the village well, as if she'd known exactly when he'd return. His anger had crystallized into bitter determination during the long walk from the palace. "He turned me away," Kale said. "Whatever promise existed, he's buried it completely." "The billionaire is weak," she replied, handing him a cup of water. "But you are not, and Lord Varen fears you for a very specific reason." Her ancient eyes held secrets. "There is a prophecy, child, spoken when the sacred promise was first made." "What prophecy?" "It was said, only one bound by the forgotten oath can unseat the corrupt and restore what was stolen. Varen has built his entire power on the billionaire's guilt and secrets. He manipulates that guilt like a puppeteer controls strings. If truth emerges, if the promise is fulfilled, his influence crumbles to dust. He becomes nothing." She reached into her worn bag and withdrew another carved wooden token, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift in the moonlight. "This belonged to your mother. She gave it to me before she died, making me swear to find you when the time was right. It pairs with your pendant, two pieces of one truth." Kale took the token. When he held it near his pendant, both pieces began to glow faintly, pulsing like heartbeats. "Now run," she said urgently. "Varen's men are coming, and this time they won't just threaten." They came at midnight, 6 armed men, their faces hidden, their intent clear as death. Kale woke to the sound of splintering wood as they broke down his cottage door. He rolled from his bed and grabbed his work knife, knowing it was useless against swords. The first attacker lunged through the doorway. Kale dodged, overturned his table as a barrier, and dove through the back window. Glass cut his arms as he hit the ground running. Shouts erupted behind him. Torches blazed to life, turning night into a hunting ground. Kale sprinted toward the forest, his bare feet pounding earth. An arrow hissed past his ear. Another buried itself in a tree trunk inches from his head. His lungs burned, his vision blurred with fear and exhaustion. Just as hands reached for him, a figure emerged from shadows, a palace guard Kale had never seen before. The man's sword flashed once, twice, 3 times. 2 attackers fell. The others hesitated. "Come," the guard commanded, grabbing Kale's arm. "I know a place they won't follow." They ran together through dense woods, the sounds of pursuit fading gradually behind them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they stopped in a hidden clearing, where ancient ruins jutted from the earth like broken teeth of some long-dead giant. "Who are you?" Kale gasped. "Marcus. I served the billionaire's late wife. She made me swear to protect her greatest secret. You." Marcus led Kale deep into the ruins, through passages only visible to those who knew where to look. Stone walls bore carvings worn smooth by centuries, yet somehow still powerful, still watching. "This place is sacred," Marcus explained, his torch casting dancing shadows. "Long ago, before the billionaire's family controlled this region, promises made here were considered unbreakable. The very stones witnessed oaths and held them eternal." They entered a central chamber where moonlight streamed through a broken ceiling. The walls exploded with symbols, thousands of them, covering every surface in intricate patterns. Kale approached slowly, drawn by something he couldn't name. His pendant grew warm against his chest, almost hot. As he drew near the wall, some symbols began to glow with the same faint light as his pendant. "Impossible," Marcus breathed. "The stones are recognizing you." Kale pressed his pendant against the wall where the glow was brightest. Light intensified, spreading like fire across the carvings. Words in an ancient language became visible, burning gold against dark stone. Marcus studied the text, his face going pale. "It's a binding oath. The billionaire swore to protect a child born of his blood, to raise him with love, to share his legacy when the boy proved himself through honest struggle." Kale's hand trembled against the wall. The symbols matching his pendant showed a family crest, the same one Varen had recognized with such fear. The moment Kale's pendant touched the wall, the chamber filled with light. Not harsh, but warm, like sunlight through honey. The air shimmered with energy, and suddenly Kale was no longer standing in ruins. He was watching a memory unfold like a play performed just for him. A younger version of the billionaire knelt in this very chamber, his clothes simple, his face lined with grief and shame. Beside him stood a woman holding a baby. Cale recognized her face from fragments of dreams, his mother. "I cannot raise him openly," the younger billionaire was saying, his voice breaking. "My family would never accept a child born outside marriage, but I swear before these sacred stones and before heaven that I will protect him always. I will ensure he has a good life. And when he comes of age, when he has proven his heart through struggle and remains good despite hardship, I will acknowledge him and give him his rightful inheritance." The woman was crying. "You're a coward, hiding behind fear of what others think. But I accept your promise because my son deserves better than poverty and shame." She handed the baby to an old woman, the same woman who had appeared at the palace. "Raise him well, guard him, and when the time comes, remind this coward of his oath." The vision faded. Cale stood trembling in the ruins, tears streaming down his face. He was that child, the billionaire's son, hidden, denied, but bound to him by sacred promise that even time couldn't erase. Lord Varen paced his chambers like a caged wolf. The attack had failed. The boy lived. And worse, Marcus, that troublesome guard, had revealed himself as an enemy, helping Cale escape to God's new where. Varen was no fool. He'd climbed from nothing to become the billionaire's most trusted advisor through cunning and ruthless manipulation. Every secret the billionaire held, Varen had helped bury. Every shameful decision, Varen had encouraged and enabled. He'd built his entire power on the billionaire's weakness and guilt. But if the truth of Cale's identity emerged, everything would collapse. The billionaire might grow a conscience, might acknowledge his son. The inheritance Varen had been slowly manipulating into his own control would slip away like water through fingers. No, that could not happen. Varen summoned his personal scribe, a weasel of a man skilled in forgery and deception. "I need documents," Varen commanded. "Royal papers showing that the pendant Cale wears was stolen from the palace 20 years ago. Witness statements claiming his mother was a thief who seduced the billionaire and tried to extort him. Make it look authentic, aged paper, proper seals, everything. But my lord, creating false royal documents is punishable by death if discovered." Varen's smile was cold as winter. "Only if discovered. And the only people who know the truth will be dead soon enough." He tossed a heavy purse of gold onto the table. "You have until morning. Don't fail me." The forged documents reached the billionaire at dawn, delivered by Varen with practiced concern etched on his face. They looked devastatingly official, complete with royal seals and aged paper that appeared decades old. "I didn't want to believe it, my lord," Varen said, his voice heavy with false regret. "But I've uncovered the truth about that boy. His mother was a known thief who worked in the palace years ago. She stole that pendant during a celebration, then fabricated a story about a promise when she got pregnant by some unknown father." The billionaire's hands shook as he read the documents. They were convincing, too convincing. Each detail hammered at his fragile courage, building walls around the truth he'd almost embraced. "The boy is using her old lies to manipulate you," Varen continued, his voice a serpent's whisper. "Playing on your natural guilt and kindness. If you show him any mercy, every criminal in the kingdom will try the same scheme. You'll be seen as weak, foolish, easily deceived." The billionaire closed his eyes. Fear whispered, "What if he's right? What if you're being fooled? What if acknowledging Cale destroys everything you've built?" "I cannot raise him openly," the younger billionaire was saying, his voice breaking. "My family would never accept a child born outside marriage, but I swear before these sacred stones and before heaven that I will protect him always. I will ensure he has a good life, and when he comes of age, when he has proven his heart through struggle and remains good despite hardship, I will acknowledge him and give him his rightful inheritance." The woman was crying. "You're a coward, hiding behind fear of what others think. But I accept your promise because my son deserves better than poverty and shame." She handed the baby to an old woman, the same woman who had appeared at the palace. "Raise him well, guard him, and when the time comes, remind this coward of his oath." The vision faded. Cale stood trembling in the ruins, tears streaming down his face. He was that child, the billionaire's son, hidden, denied, but bound to him by sacred promise that even time couldn't erase. Lord Varen paced his chambers like a caged wolf. The attack had failed. The boy lived. And worse, Marcus, that troublesome guard, had revealed himself as an enemy, helping Cale escape to God's new where. Varen was no fool. He'd climbed from nothing to become the billionaire's most trusted advisor through cunning and ruthless manipulation. Every secret the billionaire held, Varen had helped bury. Every shameful decision, Varen had encouraged and enabled. He'd built his entire power on the billionaire's weakness and guilt. But if the truth of Cale's identity emerged, everything would collapse. The billionaire might grow a conscience, might acknowledge his son. The inheritance Varen had been slowly manipulating into his own control would slip away like water through fingers. No, that could not happen. Exile him, the billionaire said finally, his voice dead and hollow. Let it be known that anyone claiming false connection to my family will be banished from this kingdom. Make an example of him so others won't dare try the same deception. Varen bowed low, hiding his triumphant smile. It will be done immediately, my lord. You've made the wise choice, the only choice. Cale was dragged from the sacred ruins by royal guards and thrown to the ground before the palace gates. A crowd had gathered, summoned by Varen's proclamations, and rumors spread like plague through the village. Let all witness, a herald announced, his voice carrying across the square. This youth has attempted fraud against the billionaire, claiming false connection through stolen artifacts and elaborate lies. He is hereby exiled from this kingdom, forbidden to return on pain of imprisonment and death. The crowd murmured. Some faces showed pity, others suspicion and anger. Cale knelt in the dust, his heart breaking. He'd found his truth only to have it denied, twisted, destroyed. Marcus had been captured trying to help him escape. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. He was utterly alone. As guards prepared to drag him to the border, the old woman suddenly appeared at the crowd's edge. She moved through people like smoke, her eyes locked on Cale with fierce determination. In her arms she carried a sealed wooden box, its surface covered in the same sacred symbols that marked the ancient ruins. "Wait," she called, her voice carrying supernatural authority that made even the guards hesitate. The crowd fell silent. She approached Cale and placed the box in his hands. "This was entrusted to me 20 years ago with specific instructions. Give this to my son when the billionaire breaks his promise and chooses fear over truth." Cale's fingers trembled as he lifted the lid, and the crowd pressed closer to see what truth lay inside. Inside the box lay irrefutable proof that made the crowd gasp. Letters in the billionaire's own handwriting, detailing the promise he'd made and his plans to honor it when the time was right. A contract signed before 3 witnesses, their signatures still visible. And most damning, a portrait painted 20 years ago. The billionaire holding baby Cale, love and fear mixed on his younger face, the matching pendant visible around both their necks. The old woman's voice rang out across the square like a bell of judgment. Truth cannot be buried forever. This man denied his own son to protect his pride and power. He broke a sacred oath witnessed by heaven itself, and his trusted advisor has fed him lies and forged documents to keep that truth hidden, corrupting justice for his own gain. The crowd's murmur grew louder, angrier. People began to understand they'd been deceived, manipulated by a powerful man's fear and his advisor's ambition. From the village streets, more people came. Farmers Cale had worked beside for years, merchants who'd known his mother, elders who remembered the billionaire before wealth changed him into something cold and distant. They formed a protective wall around Cale, shielding him from the confused guards. "We demand justice," someone shouted from the crowd. "The promise must be honored," another called. The movement spread like wildfire through dry grass. What began as a handful of villagers became dozens, then hundreds. They marched toward the palace, Cale at their center, the proof held high for all to see. The palace filled with tension as the crowd's demands echoed through marble halls like thunder before a storm. Guards looked at each other nervously, uncertain who they served, the billionaire who paid them, or truth and justice. The billionaire descended from his chambers, each step heavier than the last. The sound of the crowd terrified him, but something deeper, shame perhaps, or exhausted conscience, made him face what was coming. He entered the great hall where advisors had gathered, their faces pale with fear. On a table lay the evidence from the box, spread out for all to see. His own letters, his own signature, his own face in that portrait holding his baby son with unmistakable love. For the first time in 20 years, he couldn't hide from himself, or from the truth staring back at him from from aged paper and painted canvas. "It's all true," he whispered, the words falling from his lips like stones dropping from a great height. "Every word. Kale is my son. I made a sacred promise and broke it out of cowardice and fear." The confession rippled through the palace like an earthquake. Guards who'd been loyal to Varen slowly stepped away from him, their faces showing disgust and betrayal. "My lord," Varen said, his voice tight with desperation, masks finally slipping. "Don't let them manipulate you with sentiment. We can still control this situation, we can." "Enough!" The billionaire's voice cracked like thunder, stronger than it had been in years. "You've poisoned my mind, Varen, fed my fears, made me betray my own blood. I see it now, every lie, every manipulation." Varen's mask finally cracked completely, his face twisted with rage and cornered desperation. In one swift, reckless move, he lunged for an ancient scroll kept in a glass case near the throne, the original promise document, written on sacred paper in the ruins 20 years ago. He grabbed it and ran, smashing through a window in an explosion of glass and wood. Guards gave chase, but Varen knew the palace better than anyone. He disappeared into the night, heading for the one place he thought might offer escape, the sacred forest that surrounded the ancient ruins. Kale saw him flee and gave chase without thinking, his feet carrying him through palace corridors and out into darkness. Behind him, he heard Marcus and others following, but Kale ran faster, driven by something deeper than thought. The forest seemed to part for him, branches moving aside as if recognizing him. Behind, he heard Varen crashing through undergrowth, desperate and wild. They reached a clearing bathed in moonlight. Varen stood there, the scroll clutched against his chest, pulling out a torch. "If I can't have power, no one will," he screamed. "Without this scroll, there's no proof. It'll be your word against mine, and I'll destroy you both." He held the torch to the scroll's edge, flames licking toward the ancient paper. But the moment fire touched the sacred document, the forest itself reacted. The ground trembled. Vines erupted from the earth with supernatural speed, wrapping around Varen's legs, his arms, pulling him down. He screamed, struggling against nature's judgment. The scroll fell from his hands, unburned, protected by forces beyond human understanding. Kale picked it up, feeling its warmth pulse through his fingers. The words glowed in the darkness. A father's promise to a son, a vow to choose love over fear, to grant inheritance to one who proved good despite suffering. The old woman appeared from between the trees, her face serene. "The forest is sacred. It knows when justice must be served. Varen chose corruption. The land rejects him." She turned to Kale. "But you, child, the promise must be fulfilled. Your father waits." At the clearing's edge, the billionaire emerged, tears streaming down his weathered face. He had followed them here, drawn by some instinct deeper than fear. He fell to his knees before his son. "Forgive me," he said, his voice breaking. "I was weak. I chose comfort over courage, fear over love. You suffered for my cowardice, years of poverty and loneliness because I was too afraid to do what was right. But if you'll allow it, Kale, I want to be the father I promised to be 20 years ago." Kale looked at this broken man, his father, and felt anger war with compassion. He'd suffered so much because of this man's weakness. Yet he also saw genuine remorse, desperate hope for redemption. The old woman's words echoed in his mind. "Truth heals, fear destroys." "Stand up, father," Kale said quietly, helping the billionaire to his feet. "Let's go home together, both of us, and let's build something better than what came before." In the palace courtyard, as dawn broke golden over the kingdom, the billionaire publicly acknowledged Kale as his son and rightful heir before all witnesses. He shared his wealth with those Varen had oppressed through manipulation and lies. He freed servants bound by debt and rebuilt the villages his greed had neglected.